So we're going to go over surveys today in our class. If you guys have any questions, post them in the chat screen and we'll try to get to them. If I can't answer a question for you, I'm going to get you the answer. So I'm going to go ahead. Share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
All right, perfect. All right. Okay, so what is a survey? A survey is a map of real estate property that shows where the property is located on the earth. Boundary lines of the property, the improvements on the land, and access to the property. So as you can see, it shows everything, the actual property line, which is those big, thick black lines. There's a fence that you can see right there. The structure, you're going to see all of that on the survey.
We'll go back to that for a second. I want to point out a couple things.
Go ahead.
It's always funny to me how the front property line is not at the street. A lot of people think it is, but your sidewalk is generally in an easement and your property line starts. There's probably 10 to 15 feet between your property line and the street on the front of the house where the driveway is.
Yep, there's a setback. And then there's usually easements for sidewalks, utilities, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that and show you in a little bit some more. So this is always, one of the biggest questions. Is a survey going to be required? So it just always depends. How the property is being purchased, what your client wants, what type of property really. If you have a land property, you're probably going to want to get that surveyed, even if it's a cash deal. So typically on a cash deal, the buyer has the option to purchase a survey, but it's not going to be required. But like I said, if you're having a ton of acreage and you're going to want to have your buyer go ahead and get that surveyed. Now, a buyer who is receiving a loan may be required to have the survey. 99% of the time, that lender is typically going to require us to endorse a Florida Form 9, which is a survey endorsement. And if we need to put that on our policy, and that's what they want, then there will need to be a survey done. If the seller has a survey and no permanent structural changes have been made, then more than likely we'll be able to use that survey and have everyone do a survey affidavit. Okay.
I'm going to comment on that because I think it's absolutely foolish to ever buy a piece of real estate and not have it surveyed. There's just too many things that can go wrong. If vacant land, undoubtedly, you get a survey. I don't care if you're paying cash or not, because you want to see the four corners of that property and make sure it's the property you think you're getting. When you got a street full of 4 vacant lots in a row, how do you know where one lot ends and one lot begins? How do you know if the tree is actually on your property?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm very bullish on that. I agree. Brenda says I agree always. Always. Now, it's arguable if the seller has a survey, but it depends on how current it is. And the survey also needs to be certified to the property owner. The survey that the seller gave you was their survey. It's not entitled to you. So anyway, I just don't think there's an option for it. Survey every time. If not, you're foolish. Because what if you want to put a fence in? Don't you want to know where your property lines are? That survey you just showed us over there, the fence looked like 5 feet in from the property line. So the guy's shorting himself 5 feet of property. Okay, I'll just comment once in a while.
No, good.
And Craig, I wanted to add to that too. Like, if you think about it, one of the documents we want when we go on a listing presentation or when we get a listing is to have that, is to ask for that survey, because we know it's taken some time, to get some of those surveys back, which I'm sure she'll probably discuss. But it's important to have some of those documents ready to go when you list the property to save time. And again, if they decide they don't want the survey, they can order it, but at least giving them the option that it's there.
Well, let's go on to the critical date timeline, which also says, the contract says, if the seller has a survey, they're required to provide it within 5 days of the effective date. So if that's the requirement, why don't we get it if they have it? Makes sense.
Okay, so we have a question about how much does a survey generally cost? So that's gonna, it really goes by how big the property is and what type of property is. Some are meets and bounds, which is easier. And those typically cost about, right now, about $350 for an average size home. Now, if it's acreage, depending on how much it is, it really ranges. So I could give a roundabout, like for about an acre, usually about like 550. If it's pretty simple, not a lot of trees, anything like that. If it's heavily wooded and it's more than that, it can get up there.
I bought 2.5 acres in Brooksville and the survey was $900.
So
And if you get into bigger properties, you can spend, hell, one of my neighbors is a surveyor, he owns GeoPoint Surveying. And he's surveying all the work in, what's it called? The Water Street District. And his contracts are, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars jobs.
yeah, they can definitely get up there in price. And at Paramount, we will try to do everything we can to get you the best deal. We work with many different companies and we will shop around for you. So we will try to get your client the best what we can do. Okay, so what's required on the survey? So there's certain things on a survey that it needs to have in order for it to be a valid survey. First is the surveyor certification. It includes their ID number, date of the survey, and a signature. A lot of the times you'll have the first page of a survey and not the second page when you go on your listing appointments, because they'll see, oh, I have this paper, here's the survey. And then they don't have the second page. And the second page, a lot of the times, has the surveyor certification, the ID number, and all of that, and the signature. Usually also the legal description. So that's another thing that has to be on there. It has to have an accurate legal description matching the deed of record and the contract. It has to have the physical property address, and it has to have a sketch or picture of the home. If the lot is empty, it'll be blank. Questions on that? We got some stuff in the chat. Lee Gregory said 3 acres in Ruskin for $1,400 on prices. Yeah, it definitely can vary. Okay, so here is just a typical survey from NextGen. They're definitely one of the companies that we use. Okay, so as you can see, here's the property line. The blue, you can see the structure. You can see that they have a covered screen patio and their driveway. And here's that easement that Craig was talking about. See, this is the main street and you still have all of this property right here. Their driveway actually extends past their property line up to the street. Okay, so it crosses the easement. You can see that they have a fence with a fence line. And then right down here in the left-hand corner, you can see what we need, what is required on the survey. So the date of the field work drawn by the surveyor. It looks like they had a revision and they have their seal over here in the right-hand corner. And then on that second page, like I said, you're going to have your legal description. Like I said, that has to match. It has to be what the deed says, word for word. If not, we have a problem with, and we'll have to definitely have it resurveyed if we're trying to use an old one. This is who it's certified to. So Will Buyer. This was the buyer. This is who the survey was done for. It has the flood zone, and then there's some survey notes. Like I said, driveway crosses the boundary line. The fence lies near the boundary line. So the ownership is, can't be determined. The fence extends through the utility easement. So when that kind of stuff happens, they could be required to move their fence and have it set back because it's going over the easement. There's a shed and concrete surface that also go along the through the utility easement. So they just built wherever and weren't really paying attention to their survey, which that can cause problems down the road. If you put a structure over the easement and a utility company needs to dig there, you're going to have to, yep, they're going to dig there and you're going to have to move your structure. If it's a fence, not as hard, but if it's like that, a concrete shed, not going to be a good time.
Yeah, they have the right to take it down and not put it back up.
Correct. So again, really important for a buyer to know all these things. That's why we will not reuse a survey if there have been any kind of permanent structural changes. And what I mean by that, if there has been concrete poured anywhere, that's permanent. A fence is not permanent. We can move that. If they've added a pool, that's permanent. All those kind of things make it to where we cannot reuse a survey. So how do you read the survey and what do you need to look for? So this is really important because if you guys have a survey that you're looking for,
But before you go on, so go back to your certification page, because it's certified to the buyer for sure, but it's also certified to the title company who's insuring it.
Yep.
And it's certified to the lender who's lending on it. And so a lender's not going to let you use an old survey because it has to be certified to them. Correct, Mike. That's why you'd have a survey to show your property lines.
Yeah, some lenders will let us use the old ones. It just depends.
Well, you could have a survey recertified also,
Correct.
if the surveyor is willing to do it, and they'll charge you less.
Okay, so how do you read the survey and what are you looking for? Okay, so again, you need to match that legal description with the deed. So that's going to be one of the first things you look for. You want to find your field date and the job number and make sure that's on there. Your surveyor's information. Any notes that the surveyor has. You need to have your certifications. Then those will make it all a valid survey. Now, when you're reading it, you want to make sure that you understand. So again, here's the property line. Big black line. Here's your home. Right here, they have an enclosed pool area. So those are all going to be your structures. This one has a septic tank. So if you have a property that has septic tanks, you want to know where the septic tank and the leach field is. So you want to make sure that that is on your survey. So let the company know that, hey, there's a septic tank because you're going to want to have that where it is. So right here is an encroachment. There's something against their property that is not theirs. I can't really read what it is. Looks like a propane tank. So that's crossing into their property line. That's what, it's encroaching. So it's not theirs, it's on their property. You got to make sure that, what an encroachment is, if it's somebody else's fence going over their property line, or if someone builds a driveway or a back patio and it's on, your buyer's property line, then that can be an issue.
Yeah. So typically speaking, you would have a front setback, a side setback, and rear setbacks. And whatever's in the easement of the setback on the side of the property line, it has to be clear. So when that propane tank is sticking in the middle, or the fence is over, or the building shifts over, then you've got what's called an encroachment, which would need to be satisfied, which is what the contract addresses. Any encroachments that the survey identifies, the seller would be responsible for fixing. So what you'll see a lot of times is, and I've had this happen, I sold a house over here in my neighborhood. And when the builder built it, we're supposed to have 7.5 foot side setbacks, and they encroached on the side setback by 3 inches. And it's $1.5 million house, so we're not going to knock it down. And what we did is we went to the HOA and got them to sign an exception, allowing that to happen, because that's really all they could do. And they didn't make a big stink out of it. But a lot of times you'll see like people do landscape curbing and they don't know. They just put the big circle around their house because the landscaping's growing up over time, and they block it in with nice landscaping, and that'll very often go across the easements. I'm pretty sure my neighbor just violated my own setback. He put a paver path for his golf cart to drive around his house to get back to the dock. And I'm damn sure he put it right up to the fence. So he built across the easement. I don't care, it doesn't bother me, but it might be a problem in the future.
Could be. Okay, so the legal description describes the boundary lines. Like we said, surveyor's information, the name of the surveyor, the company that completed it, the date. We want to make sure that we have the job number, confirms the date the field work was complete, and assigns identifying job number to the survey. We want to check out the structures, identify any structure located on the property, the home, a detached garage, sheds, storage buildings, fence, pool, concrete patios, an AC pad. You want to make sure all of this is on the survey. So if you see something and you're looking at the property and you see something and then it's not on your survey, go have your surveyor go at it, because that's something that they need to do.
And you really do need to double check your surveys, because the survey, and I don't want to make this as a discrimination statement, but surveyors are just messy guys. They forget, they're here, they're blow in, blow out, get it done, move on. I mean, I had to have 2 elevation certificates shot of my house because I screwed it up both times. Right. So it is incumbent upon you as an agent to look, especially like Tiffany's saying, if you see a propane tank or something, get them to mark it on the survey. Give them the instructions up front, I guess would be a better.
Yep.
And then make sure they do it.
Any kind of garages, sheds, anything, make sure it's on there. The septic and drain fields, like I said, it's sometimes noted on the survey, depending on the type of loan. But I will tell you, get it done. Tell them that you want it on there.
They'll probably charge you more too. That's
It's
okay.
definitely something, let your title company let us know at Fairmont, that, hey, this property has a septic or a drain field, and we need to make sure that our surveyor, knows about it, and that when we get our quote, they have that added. Okay, and then certifications shows who the survey was certified to. Should always be the buyer, lender, title company, and the underwriter. So whoever is insuring that policy, it should be on there as well. Okay, so easements, this allows other parties access to the property. Oops. Reasons depending on the easement. The most common easement are drainage utility easements, the road right of way, and access easements. Hold on, I'm feeling really dizzy.
One second.
Tiffany's not feeling well. She said she was feeling really dizzy. We have a room full of people. There's like 50 people in here, and she got really nervous. No, she just said she wasn't feeling very well and had to go sit down for a minute. So you and I can banter about surveys.
Yes, we've got plenty of survey experiences to do with. And we got a PowerPoint to follow, so we're good.
Yeah. Where were we at? Access and easements.
Yep.
Good. So move on to encroachments. An encroachment is a structure that crosses over the property line or into an existing easement on the property. Certain common encroachments. Typically, you'll see sheds that go into an easement, a fence encroaching into the adjoining property. Ownership of fences cannot be determined by a survey. So we do see that a lot with fences. Somebody will say, hey, that your fence is on their property or their fence is on my property. And when you're buying the home, sometimes the current homeowner doesn't even know who owned the fence because it was put up so long ago. Those are times your people and communication skills have to come out. And you knock on some doors, ask some questions, and see who's doing what's going on with it. Generally
Speaking, the ugly side of the fence belongs to the owner.
Generally, unless you live next to somebody. We did have an issue with an encroachment. So it's not encroaching from one person's property into another, like encroaching into drainage easements. So in Mira Bay, one time we had an encroachment into the lagoon easement. So the water easement, somebody built their pool in their patio and it was 6 inches into that easement. Yeah, and the current homeowner who owned the property and that easement was going in, it was going into the easement. They didn't do it. It was the person before that. So, and they didn't get a survey. They just used the survey that they had, and the survey they had didn't show it as an easement. So we sent the surveyor back out and they verified that it was indeed an encroachment. So they did have some ramifications that they could go back to on their title policy because it wasn't noted prior, but they still had to close it in a couple days. So,
And I'll tell you this too, Chris, I've had it happen quite a few times. The surveyor comes out and says they're an encroachment and they were wrong. We made them come out and do it again and they measured wrong.
correct. That's why we had the surveyor come back out to verify and see if it really was that. But in this instance, the seller gave a $10,000 reduction or credit to make sure the sale went through, and then it was up to them to go back and try and remedy it and get it back later.
Wow.
Yeah. So pools, patios, those are big ones that you do see, because even the people who put up my fence, we gave them surveys and they went out and they measured, they put it up, and they still they put the fence up about 2 feet into the water easement, the drainage easement in the back. So
We sold a house on Flamingo Drive once on the golf course side, and the owner had erected his own fence and he decided to take 20 feet of the golf course property. So he put his fence out there, and when our buyer bought the house, they thought the yard was huge.
Yeah.
And it was 20 feet shorter because he just put the fence out on the golf course property, and that became a big issue.
He just walked out and said, "That's mine."
Fine, just put the fence out there a little further. The golf course won't miss.
Yeah. So AC pads, that's another thing. If you move your AC, if you're having something installed, you see how close some of these homes are. And when somebody builds a pool or puts a patio in the back and then moves their AC around to the side, they don't always pay attention to that. Your AC guy may just move it around the side. He may not see the survey and he may put something in there. You have to be aware of those things. Uncommonly, the house can be encroaching into the adjoining property. It requires additional research to determine if the property can be insured.
We've had that happen too.
Yeah, and then more times than not, you'll see the house is actually, it's not the house that's encroached. The house encroaches into the setback lines, and it was built a little too far to one side, and you have a few inches into a setback.
Ike's actually had one where the house was built on the corner, the square building, the corner of the house.
Yeah.
Was about 6 or 9 inches on the neighbor's property, not in the easement, on the neighbor's property. The only solution to that was we had to buy a piece of the neighbor's property, which is what we did, but it was out there in Waimama.
Wow.
But that's how you solve those problems. And if that owner wasn't nice, that's a real problem.
That's a real, these are all things that are going to delay your closing because it does become
Yeah.
an issue for title. Some of the simple things can be signed off on, sign a hold harmless and say, we're going to sign a hold harmless for that portion of the title policy. But some of these other things, they've got to be remedied or else you may not be able to get an insurable title policy.
Yep. It's like a car that floods. The title's no good.
And she's back. Good. Do you have anything you want to add on encroachments into like fences, pools, AC, patio, things like that?
No, that's pretty good what you said. But you brought up it is one.
Yeah, it's on.
But you brought up a good topic over there that I want to add to. When you have a big property, people want to go ahead and subdivide it. A lot of the times, that survey, each property is going to have to get surveyed. If there's wetland, there's going to have to be a wetland survey. And it's not just as easy as quick claiming part of that new legal description over. In Hillsborough County, you need to get a verification letter that they allowed it. And we actually have to have that. So that can, if you go to list a large property and you see a ton of quick claim deeds, deeding off parts of the property, you need to make sure that they have the parcel split letter.
Yep.
Because down the road, it can cause a lot of issues.
Sorry, I'm just looking at my face that got logged in from another location. So somebody logged in with my Zoom account and it's with Susie's name. Sorry, I didn't mean that.
You're good.
Good.
You're good. It's going to be a crazy day today.
Now you
It's okay.
mentioned wetlands. Do you cover wetlands further into this? You're not sure? Okay. So what, you talk about wetlands. Wetlands, are they typically marked on a normal survey?
No.
So that's a huge.
You could
thing.
ask for it.
You have to ask for it. And it's not as easy as just having the surveyor go out, survey the property and mark the wetlands, because the surveyors don't mark the wetlands. You have to go to whoever the Environmental Protection Committee is, like HPC, the Hillsborough County Hillsborough County Environmental, the EPC, sorry. They will have to go out. You order a wetland delineation. They come out and they mark the wetlands with flags. Then you have to order the survey and have the surveyor go out and tell them you want the wetlands marked on the survey, because they'll go out there, they'll see the flags. If they didn't have it on their order, they're not going to mark the wetlands on it, because you have to pay them to mark the wetlands and put those marks on the survey. So wetlands are not something that's going to come up just because you get a survey and you're like, wow, it looked pretty wet back there, but I don't see wetlands on here. If it was never done by the EPC, never put on there, never on a prior survey, it's not going to come up on the normal boundary survey.
Correct.
What's next?
Okay. So
Things to look for.
things to look for on the survey. So the house, driveways and walkways, sheds, storage houses, pools, fences, the water lines, the easements where the air conditioner and pad are, basically any structure that affects the boundary lines of the property. So you have your fence. Looks like the neighbor's wood fence is encroaching a little on the property in the right-hand corner. It's going past that setback, and it's also on the left. Basically almost all around the four corners, the neighbor is encroaching. So you have a 2-story brick house, your concrete driveway, and the property lines on this one. So this one's a typical survey. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you would want to make sure, again, that it has your certifications, the date, the signature, which isn't shown on here, and your legal description. So there's just another one. So this one has 2 parcels on it, parcel A and parcel B. You can see where there's a lot line per the plat. So they divided it. So this is what I was talking about when you have multiple, where they've split it. But again, you want to make sure that they have that full split letter. So let's see. So they kind of share a driveway. It goes over. The neighbors have a carport to the south that enters through the lot across the rear. So that's, where they're encroaching. And so the set iron rod. So when the surveyor goes out, they're going to flag all around the property line, and they go from those rods. If you go and you've had a survey done and the flags are all removed, or the flags are missing, or they didn't flag it, make them go back out. Because a lot of the times the buyer wants to see where those flags are, so they know exactly where their fence can go, exactly where, their property line is done. So if there's no flags, make them go fix it.
That iron rod, is that basically like the pin that they go and they grab a little metal detector, dig down, find the pin and start counting off from there?
So usually they already know where those are, because they use the meets and bounds. So they can, when you read a survey, or when they go to survey, they do the north end of the southeast corner, all of that good stuff. And sometimes that's actually on our legal description. If it's a long legal, most of the time you have short where it's just lot and block. But if it's meets and bounds, it's going to be all on the legal description.
So a lot of the properties in neighborhoods that we see that all the lots platted out will have a pin like that that's identifiable to make it easier for them to identify all of that.
Yep, the lot and block.
We'll say set capped iron rod or found capped iron rod. So they'll put one in the ground to market, or they'll find one that's already existing. And the survey will say SCIR or FCIR.
So here's another survey. And, you know, there's some things missing. Anyone guess what we're missing? Anyone? Anyone answer?
You mean missing
Well, legal description, the surveyor's name, the
Yep.
job
that's
number,
right.
stamp?
So
the
basically
certifications.
everything. Yeah, legal description, the certifications, stamp. So we can't use this survey. It would not be valid. And like I said, a lot of the times it's because there's one page and then a second page and we don't have them. Some of our vendors like NextGen, I know they'll do it. And there's a couple others, but they will, if they still have the survey, we'll be able to request the second page or, you know, request it like, hey, you know, here's what we have. Can we get the rest? And if they still have it, they will send it to us, usually not without a charge because we work so much with them. So that's one of the, you know, better reasons to use Paramount is because we work with so many vendors and they know us. They're, you know, really part of our fan agency because they work so much with our company as a whole.
Now, what do you tell people that, so the concrete driveway going through the utility easement, obviously you have to be able to access your property and that's fine. But what do you tell people about these other issues, like the sidewalks, the screens going into the utility easements there?
Well, for us, we're going to point it out to you guys and you're going to want to point it out to your clients because they need to know that, hey, these are in the utility easement. If, you know, a utility company needs to dig or whatever, they're going to do what they have to do. So that sidewalk, if they need to bust it, they're going to bust it.
And they're not going to replace it.
No.
You built into the utility easement. You put something in there that's permanent or semi-permanent. They're going to do what they have to do to access their utilities or install new utilities. And they will not replace what you put into the utility easement. It's going to be on you. So,
and it's not a claim on your title insurance policy either, because this could be noted as an exception on the policy.
you look at the back of the property with something like this, like I had mentioned a few minutes ago about the pool encroaching in. This is a screened pool enclosure that's encroaching by a few feet, 3 feet into, you can see it's a 10-foot utility easement and the screen goes 7 feet from the back of the property line. You have 3 feet of your pool that's encroaching into that. How do you dig that up? What do you do with that? How do you replace that without damaging the pool, damaging the pavers? And there's probably pipes going back. There's a lot of concerns there. So that's why you have to pay attention to these surveys, be able to have these open discussions with your clients, with the other agents, have good communication through the process. Let's see what's next. Oh, same
So
thing.
same thing, yeah. Make sure you know where the pool and where everything is on the easements and explain that. So if you go on a listing, you know, appointment, or you're working with a buyer, either way, and they do have an old survey, try to get a copy of that so that you can see if there's any issues on it. So that way, if you're working with the buyer, you can point those out ahead of time, still get a new survey, but you can at least point that out and let them know, hey, this is what it is.
We have a lot of issues in Tampa too with the one we had recently. There's tree surveys. You can actually get tree surveys where they'll mark the types of trees and whether they can be removed or not. A lot of houses, they bought the house, they bought the lot next door and they planted trees on it. And now we can't build on that lot because there's trees that are protected. So tree surveys are a deal. We also had some old streets where there were some water lines that were built into the properties that it's just, they were not in the right places. Think of the technology we have now with surveys and drones to fly around and shoot what we had to. In the old days, in the 40s and 50s, it was all not with the technology we have now. And there were a lot of mistakes made.
Mike Clayman asked the question, do you get an adjustment to the selling price? Well, the answer is it depends. That's your, the buyer has to make that decision. What happens when you buy a property? What are you buying? You're buying the property and any problems, any issues, any encroachments, any future problems that come with it. And then what also do you have to do now that you own that problem if you decide to sell? You know about it,
Disclose
it became an issue, you have to disclose it. You can't just do that and hope you get a buyer under contract, put pressure on them 5 days before closing when they find out and hope they'll close by a small adjustment. You have to disclose those things. And it's going to be known. There's going to be documentation that you knew about it. So it's up to the buyer and the seller to figure that out. And it's up to the buyer if they want to move forward with that, if the seller wants to fix it, if they want to create an adjustment, if they want to give a credit, if they want to extend the closing. But that's where, again, communication comes in play.
And if the lender will even accept it.
That's true. You may not be able to close on a property with that in place if the lender doesn't accept the title policy the way as it is.
So a lot of the times, if we cannot issue a clear Florida Form 9, and there's too many exceptions to the, to that endorsement. Yeah, if there's too many exceptions to that endorsement, then the lender could turn around and say, hey, we can't do it. We can't insure this. We will do our best at Paramount to try to get another underwriter. If that's, you know, if everyone still really wants to go through with this, we'll try to get another underwriter to, you know, and still let us use the endorsement with the exceptions. But yeah, a lender may not lend on it if we can't get the clear Florida Form 9.
So what's the, does the contract provide timelines for all of this? Yes. Yes, everybody shake your head. Yes. It provides timelines for this. It's under the title evidence, title section of the, it gives the buyer time to review these things. It says that if once you notify the seller in writing of the issue, it gives them 30 days to remedy that issue. If they're not able to remedy that issue after using diligent effort and good faith to do so, you can agree to extend. And then after a certain, I think it's 190 days or 120 days, then either party can cancel after that timeline if it hasn't been remedied at that point. But the contract covers this. It doesn't say if and then and maybe. It says once the buyer notifies the seller of the issue, the seller has 30 days. So it doesn't say the buyer can cancel. So if your buyer's like, I'm out of here, like, wait. The contract gives the seller the ability to try to cure this issue. It doesn't say you can just cancel and run away. It says the seller has 30 days and you've got to sit tight for a minute and allow this to happen.
And that brings up a good point with your title company. Okay. If you're representing the buyer, you know you're going to need a survey. Let us know ASAP so that we can get that ordered. A lot of surveyors are backed up. So, you know, we'd hate for at the last minute, we finally get our survey and we're closing the next day and you guys don't even have time to review it. So the sooner you can get your client to give us the A-OK to order it, because we won't order it until the buyer, you know, says, hey, go ahead. The sooner you guys do that, the better off we are. Now that can also run in with issues with the lender and you need to let the buyer know that, yeah, we want to make sure that we have the survey and we want to be able to review it. But at the same time, if the lender has any questions or doubts about this loan going through, we won't order the survey because there's a good chance that if it falls apart from lending, now they have to pay the $350 for a survey that they're not, you know, using. Sometimes if you immediately get it back under contract, like if we'll be able to reuse it for the next person, and then the surveyor won't charge your buyer.
Mike asked, what if the seller refuses to remedy an issue?
And the buyer can accept it as it is, or the buyer can walk away and get their money back.
Because the contract says the seller they'll have 30 days to use diligent effort and good faith. If they're refusing to, then your buyer will have the right to cancel and walk away no matter what point in the contract it is, because the seller's refusing to adhere to the terms of the contract. But can't force anybody to do anything. We just have terms in the contract to say what's supposed to happen and how we can help to move that along. Good. So,
Sarah had an interesting question, Chris. Does the buyer or the agent request the remedy for the issues that show up?
well, the contract.
Everything is between the buyer and the seller.
Yeah, the contract always says the buyer does it, but the contract also says that that we as the agent act as the intermediary, and disclosure to an agent is as good as disclosure to the consumer. So when the buyer makes the request of us, we are the ones to make the request to them. So the buyer is the person under contract, so is the seller. So the buyer lets us know, and we take that next step.
Yes, I guess technically you say the buyer finds out or you find out, you tell the buyer. And then in most cases, especially with our sellers, we have a duty of obedience. So if the buyer tells us to notify the seller, then we do what we're supposed to do. But it's everything in the contract is buyer and seller. We're not a party to the contract, but
Yeah,
we're
so
an agent of a party to the contract.
quick sidebar. I'm having a lot of conversations with people, and a lot of us are taking on a greater level of responsibility for decisions in the contract. We are advisors. We don't make the decisions. So you have to remove yourself from that scenario. You're not the one that makes the ultimate decision. You're the one who advised them. I know they ask us, well, what would you do? You have to be strong enough to give them the truth and the facts, the pros and the cons of both sides, what can potentially happen, and give them advice based on what you know. But ultimately, it's always their decision. We're not making those decisions for them.
That's where you always say, you might want to check with an attorney on this one because you don't want to be practicing law.
Your contract says that. If you don't understand something, please check with the proper professionals.
And we have an in-house attorney, Jim Holloway. So if you guys need to ask him questions, just let us know. We can give you his information, or, we'll ask him for you, whatever the best way works.
Survey facts. Can you use a prior survey on a transaction? And if so, how old is too old? Who wants to chat in and answer? How old is too old? 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20? How old is too old to use a survey? Throw some chats in there and let's see who gets that right. One chat. What do we got? 3. That's one. One person decided they wanted to take a chance and throw an answer out. Jimmy, what do you think? How old is too old? Stop Googling it. 3 years. It depends. If anything has changed, it's too old. 10 years, 5 years, no age as long as no improvements.
Yep.
Tiffany?
Yeah, it's no age as long as there have not been any permanent structural changes.
Jimmy, is that what Google said? So no age. You can use any survey as long as there's been no improvement. So who verifies that? The seller will have to sign they'll have to testify to that, correct?
Yes, so they have to sign a affidavit at the time of closing that they did not make any permanent structural changes. Now, if you're helping someone or someone who's doing a refinance, we can almost always use their survey. If they put a permanent structural change and we can see that it's not even close to the boundary line or anything like that, then we'll reuse it. So if you have someone and you're recommending Paramount, just let them know that we can use their survey. Even, we can make exceptions on that.
Would you have to sign something if you use a prior survey? You touched on that. I want you to
Yep.
clarify.
Again, if they are reusing the survey, both parties the seller will sign a seller affidavit. The buyers will sign that they recognize that we're using a new or a reused survey, and they actually sign on the survey. So on the top, they will actually physically sign that they have seen the survey and that they acknowledge that we are using a prior survey.
Yeah. So
Don't most lenders want to be certified to that survey though?
Most of the time, as long as we're issuing a Florida Form 9, it's okay. They'll allow us to do it. So there's a lot of times where we can reuse the survey.
Craig,
most-
what's your stance on surveys when you're buying a property? You say this pretty often.
100%. Always get one.
Always order a new one.
Always
Why-
order them.
Why wouldn't you? Look at the instance that we had. We had a buyer that we had the seller who bought a home. We didn't represent them in the purchase, but they were selling their home. We represented them. A buyer was buying that home. They found out the pool encroached into the water easement there, into the lake easement by about 6 inches or so. So they obviously used a prior survey. I don't know if the pool is on it. It wasn't on it. We don't know exactly what had happened, but they used a prior survey and now they were damaged to the tune of $10,000 because of that. So always get a new survey is a recommendation. It's not a requirement, but crazy things happen. And Craig says that all the time. And that's always in the back of my head whenever I'm talking to somebody about it. Well, I could use that. My recommendation is always to get a new one because you never know who did the old one and what may have happened or transpired since then. And even though a seller may sign an affidavit saying they've not done anything, you ever known anybody to tell a lie before?
Yeah.
We don't know. So it's always safer to be on that and recommend it. If they don't want to, that's fine.
And really talk to your cash buyers, because a lot of cash buyers are, they just, oh, we don't have, it's not required, so I'm not going to do it. And you might not even have a prior survey. And the cash buyer is just like, yeah, but they still need to know. They need to know exactly what they're getting into. So if you can recommend that they get one, at least then it's not, on you guys. You told them. And if they make the decision not to do it, that's on them.
Good segue into 5 great reasons to purchase a survey.
Yep.
Number-
Undisclosed rights and easements. So you may own your new home and its surrounding land, but someone else might have a right to use a portion of your property. A survey will show physical evidence of the rights of others to use your property for access, parking, utilities, and other situations. So there's an agreement in place for them to use the property. So a lot of times, if a property has no other way to get to it other than going through your neighbor's property, they're going to have that easement to use to have like a driveway or, because there's no other way to access.
Number 2.
Okay, undiscovered encroachments. A survey may be the only way to tell if a third party holds a claim to part of your property because their improvements, such as a garage, fence, or swimming pool, are on your land. So like we discussed, if it's going over that easement and it's falling on that line or going onto your property, you guys need to know that. You need to be able to point it out. So it's really important to be able to read these surveys. And if you guys ever have questions on it, you can come to me and I'll help you read it.
Number 3.
Okay. It may seem like this doesn't happen, but it does. Okay. That sometimes a house is built on the wrong lot. Okay. A survey provides peace of mind by showing the exact location of the house you are buying. So again, make sure the legal description matches the deed and make sure that the house's legal description on the survey matches. Because again, this does happen. Like if it was lot 14 and they put it on lot 15, it happens.
Now, typically that's something it's usually not the house being built on the wrong place. It's they put the wrong, they address the wrong legal description sometimes. Or
No, they put it on the wrong property.
We've had it happen.
yeah,
We have had it happen.
Yep.
They've literally just built the house on the wrong property. A lot of times it's like where
I do simple things like using the wrong screws. Like right. And I don't, sometimes people do put the wrong slab, plumbing, electric, block, trusses, driveway, AC all on the wrong lot.
more than likely when this happens, it was a parcel split or it's on, acreage that's, laid out weird and they'll put it on the wrong parcel, like part of the parcel. Especially if you have like a parent parcel and then the, other parcels. Okay, size of the property. Survey shows the exact dimensions of the properties, boundary lines, and how much land is included within those lines. So when you're looking at a potential property to show your clients and it says, hey, here's an acre and a half. Well, get the survey. You'll make sure that it's actually an acre and a half and not just, an acre and 1.3.
Oh, and have you ever seen a public record be completely different than what the actual property is? So you can't rely on public record just because it says it's this size by this size, this many square foot, this many acres. It's not always correct. Same thing with the square footage of a house. It's been incorrect. Bedrooms, bathrooms, they've been incorrect before. So if somebody can put the wrong house on a wrong lot, they can put the wrong info into a recording when they put it in. So that's what the survey is going to verify, all the information that you've seen.
Okay, future additions. Many residential plotted lots can have building restrictions, which could prohibit you from building close to the boundary lines. If you're thinking of adding future additions to your property, a survey can help determine if the lot is right for both your current and future plans. So if they want to add a bedroom off, the living room, but it's too close to the easement, there's a good chance that they won't get the permit to build. So you guys want to make sure that they understand that, and they make sure, you know, that they look at the survey to make sure that everything that they want to do with this home, add a pool, add additions, is possible where they want to do it.
That's an instance where you want to order the survey right away if you don't have one. If they're planning on putting an addition in, adding a pool, building a separate garage, doing that, you probably want to have a survey so that you can do that during your due diligence period, or on vacant land during your your inspection period, or during your due diligence period.
Okay, and the last is just questions. If you have questions and we didn't go over anything, there's my email, there's my phone number. Utilize it. You guys should always have this in your phones. So if you haven't plugged it in yet, make sure you do. I'm here for more than just survey questions, but if you do have a survey question, just come to me and I will, like I said, either answer or get you the right answer.
Hey, Tiffany, let me share the screen for a second. Let's talk about one more thing.
Okay.
So this is a lot that we own that I'm trying to sell. So what did I do as a seller? Chris,
Survey.
I had a survey ordered, right? And I did it through Target Surveying with Paramount's help. And I thought this was just interesting. I get a kick out of these because you see all these L3s, L12s, L11. This is legends on vacant land, especially. So here's the legend. So this segment of lot here, L13, is 16.38 feet. So if you want to know how much waterfront I have, here's the water frontage, 286 feet on the water, right? It tells me that. But then I've got this 30-foot WCASBL. I don't know what the hell that is. And then there's an 50-foot Alafia River buffer setback. So this big 3/4 of an acre lot, all I can do is really build in this section right here because I got all the other setbacks I got to fit with. And then there's a curve table. So here's my property line, and then here's where my driveway would encroach over the easement, right? We talked about that earlier. But this curve one, so how much street frontage do I have? Curve one is 57 feet, plus curve two is 33 feet. So I have 80, 90 feet on the street. And that's how you do it. You add up all those numbers together to see what these things are. So I always got a kick out of it, especially on a plat. When you're looking at a property plat, they'll have all these lines and tangents and curves data. And that's how you can figure out how big your lots are. It's kind of fun to look at. And that's why, you know, this is a problem. It's telling me the transformers here. There's a road, river, public utility easement here. Limits of upland conservation area, right? I just wanted to mention, there's a set, they set an iron rod here. So next time I get surveyed, they can find it. And they set a rod here, and they set a rod here, and they set a rod here. So I guess when we bought this, we didn't survey it because they would have found the rod, right?
And that's a good point for the conservation area, just like wetlands. You know, if you have conservation right behind the property, you guys need to make sure that nothing, any kind of structures are going into the conservation.
And I had to ask the surveyor for those delineations too.
Question, what is the process for getting an easement to a landlocked piece of property? Who decides which of the surrounding lots they get to go across?
So that's typically, it needs to be done through the two owners. So they have to come to an agreement, and Jim Holloway can write that up, but all parties need to sign. And we, as a title company, you guys have as agents, we don't get to determine who's going to do the easement. It has to be through the two owners.
What
Lauren's
about-
asked twice, I need a recommendation, please, for an individual or company that does feasibility studies for vacant land. That would be you. You're buying it. You got to determine what's feasible. So you would hire somebody, generally an engineer, or generally an engineer. Somebody like Dansco Engineering is a big go-to for me for things like that.
And it depends on what you're trying to perform to find feasible. So if it's a piece of land that's in a neighborhood that there's
I've looked
already
at the deed restrictions, the homeowners association rules.
but your feasibility period is your due diligence period. So there's not an actual company that comes out and does feasibility. Here's your feasibility period. Like we have an inspection period, you hire an inspection company. If it was that way, it'd be just your inspection period. You'd have to hire a plumber, an electrician, an AC, a roofer, and all those things to do all that, but they came up with inspection companies. They don't have a feasibility company per se. You have to determine what you need to delineate on the property to determine what's feasible for what you want to do with it.
Like on vacant land, we might need soil borings to see how compacted the soil is, if it's strong enough for you to build a foundation on, if you're gonna put pilings in.
There's also, depending, again, the size of the lot, the type of the lot. If it's already in a community that's been platted, you're not going to have to go as deep into the feasibility and digging into your due diligence. You're still going to need to do some things, but the environmental studies have probably already been done. All that's already been done if they plotted out a neighborhood and you're buying a lot in it. But if you're buying 100 acres, my brother-in-law does environmental studies just specifically for this. They came out, the company bought a ton of land. He came out and had to do a study on the property for them because somebody paved a huge parking lot on it and it wasn't approved yet. They didn't have the environmental done. So he came out and he's doing tests and sonar on the ground and found over like 100 gopher tortoise holes that they paved over, and they had to come up and remove all of them and pull all the gopher tortoises out. And then they had to pay huge fines because they're an endangered or protected species in Florida. So it just depends on the property. 2.5 acre parcel, high and dry. Well, what's your buyer want to do with it? What's the buyer?
It's for her.
No, it's you. You're buying it.
Deed restrictions are really important. HOA rules, if there are any out there, and Weeki Wachee is kind of like the Wild Wild West. It's not as commercially.
It is for a client. She said it's not for, it is for a client.
And again, look in that back chain.
Okay.
Make sure that there's not a ton of quick claim deeds that have happened. If so, like I said, there could be a big problem with it being split off in the parcels.
Does he have a builder already?
I was going to say that the best thing you can do is bring a builder in, because the builder will know what feasibility they'll have to do before they can construct.
Your
Whether
job, if they know they're going to build a home, your job is basically they should have the plans, to have a survey, be able to go to the builder and say, or with the builder and say, here's the piece of land. This is what I want to do with it. Tell me if this is feasible. And between the two of them, they will determine what needs to be done. The buyer will pay for whatever the proper inspections, studies or anything that need to be done for him to do that. And they'll get all of that completed, but they'll need a survey to do that. They'll need a builder to come in. That's what they're supposed to do during their due diligence period, which is why it says in there, it's not a normal 10-day, 15-day due diligence period on vacant land. It says if left blank 30, but in a lot of cases, it's going to be sometimes 6 months to a year. Craig, how long is the one on your property you were working on? How long is the feasibility period, due diligence?
the one we went with was a 90-day feasibility period, though other 4 offers wanted 9 months or more. And that's why I went with the one we went with, because we said, no, this is not that complicated of a project.
So you can see how different people are going to want different timelines to do different things, perform different studies and inspections to determine if what they can do is feasible on that property. So it's really up to the buyer what they want to do with it. That's their time to determine. I can do exactly what I want with this property, and I verified it during this timeline. And I got all of the information from the county, from the builder, from the environmental studies, from this, from that, and whatever I'm going to need. The builder should be able to help them.
And if the property has any kind of water, you know, there's a creek running through it, it's by a
yeah.
river, make sure you guys
Setbacks.
get an elevation certificate. You'll want to make sure that it's not, you know, you're covered for flood insurance if you're going to be required, all that good stuff, get an elevation certificate.
And Weeki Wachee, they're in that Spring Hill, Weeki Wachee, Brooksville area. It does seem that there are sinkholes and settlement issues that are more prevalent. So soil testing might be something the builder recommends to determine what's there. I mean, I had a guy here in Sefner, he built a large patio on the back of his 1.5 acre property, like 30 foot by 15 foot. And it started to sink in and pull the corner of it, pull away from the corner of his property. And he had to have a guy come out and do a soil test. And he determined that there was a lot of clay underneath there. And the clay, when it gets dry, starts to shrink and get cracks. And the actual slab started to sink. But then when it rained, clay absorbs all of that and it came back up and it solved itself. So when the soil surveys will give them some info on what's there, what they're going to have to do. Septic company would be another one to contact. A well company would be another one to contact, kind of like what you mentioned. Those are the people that you need to start contacting and asking questions. That's why a builder can typically help, because they have a lot of that in place.
And I'd rather bring the builder in as a scapegoat than you, because you're not an expert in that.
Correct.
No, I'm not trying to scare you either. If you're just buying a subdivision lot, it's, unit 4, block 2, lot 17. You have to worry about this stuff. It was platted. They did all that before they put it on the market.
And that's, give me the survey. Here's my builder. Can you build the size home, what I want with the pool, the garage, everything? Can you put it there within the deed restrictions? And you're good for the most part, if it's already platted like that. So if it's platted, you don't have those issues.
But you got to follow the HOA rules. If it's a 3,000 square foot home minimum, then you got to build a 3,000 square foot home. So there's things you want to know as well.
Any other questions or input?
No. Wow, that was a lot of information on surveys. What a potentially boring subject, but we took a whole hour out of that. But there's a lot of problems out of it that come across for surveys.
Yes.
And it's not important until it is, and then it is. Awareness, right, Chris?
Yeah. Awareness gives you what? Which gives you what?
Flexibility. Flexibility options. Roberta, it's not boring at all today. Good. That's what I love about you guys. You're constantly wanting to learn and do things right. And that's really very proud of all of you for that. Awesome.
Good.
Cool. Well, I'm going to go take a COVID test to see if I'm negative yet so I can leave my house. Feeling better today. I only had about 8 coughing spells. So
You look so lonely.
it's me and Lily hanging out.
Yeah. All right, guys.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. And again,
Thanks,
if you have
Tiffany.
any questions, let me know.
Yeah, use your title as a resource. Use people like Tiffany as a resource. Please call her, email her, ask her anything that you need. I mean, reach with anything. Even like they are an affiliate of ours, so we own a portion of the company. If you're using a different title company because it's not your seller and you didn't pick it and you have questions, you don't feel comfortable asking them, reach out to Tiffany. She's more than happy to take a call to walk you through and answer some questions about what you might be going through to help you out. So use them as a resource. They're very valuable.
And we do watch that, by the way. I sent Tiffany a report earlier this week. We had of our total listing opportunities, because generally the listing side picks the title company. So we look and see. We had 38 closings from all of our closings with Paramount. One company had 8 closings, and then another company had 5 closings, and then the rest had 1 or 2. So we're really getting a preponderance of the business, but we want to tackle the people that are getting the 8 and the 5 because they're just annoying. In my opinion.
Sorry, John did ask before, docks and such over water. So what about the survey?
That's a huge issue because you get into who owns the bottom of the waterway. Like in my neighborhood, I own to the center of the canal, so I pretty much do whatever the hell I want. A lot of waterfront communities, even in Apollo Beach, you don't own the bottom of the canal. Like in Mirror Bay, you have to secure a land lease behind the property to put your dock on the submerged lands. And that takes a survey and a legal description be created, and the HOA gets involved, and it costs $3,500 to do it. So we went through all that with the lots in Mirror Bay. And then there's about 7 different approval authorities that have to give their blessing. The EPC, the Port Authority, I think there's 7 of them that have to get permission to put a dock in. You can't just go hire a dock, but what you do is you hire a dock builder. And it took me 4 months to get my dock permit approved to replace my dock.
And you had a current existing dock, and it's
I was replacing an existing dock.
Yep.
And it took 4 months to get the permit approved. So time, that's where due diligence. If you're going to buy a lot and it's subject to you getting a dock and you want a permit before you close, look at that, 4 months to get a dock.
Yep. Does title cover existing dock?
Dies title cover existing dick.
I tried to save you, John. I'm sorry, but
I and O, they're really close to each other on the keyboard. I get it. I do it all the time.
Does title cover the existing dock?
It depends on the survey. So if it's on the survey and we don't have to, if it's on,
If it's on the survey, yes, it'll be covered. If it's marked there on the survey.
and we don't have to have, if we can issue, that clear form, part of Form 9, then yes, we can, we'll be good.
I tried, but.
I had to do it.
All right, happy
All right, guys.
Wednesday.
Happy Thursday. Oh, tomorrow,
Oh, happy
tomorrow, got Chantel Hoffman from White Sands Tax Solutions, who's going to talk about your year-end income tax. Anyway, Chantel, the FERP expert, will be in our class tomorrow talking about year-end income taxes. So that should be good for all of you. I'll send a note out for that.
Very cool.
Okay. See y'all.